everybody. As Kareem noted, there has been a response from Hamas to the hostage deal. We're currently reviewing that response, and we're discussing it with our partners in the region. Director Burns, as you know, is there, and he's working this in real time on the ground. I won't be able to comment any further on this until we know where things stand. I hope you can understand that. I know everybody's curious about what's in this response, what the Israeli reaction to it is. We're just not going to get ahead of the process. We want to get these hostages out. We want to get a ceasefire in place for 6 weeks. We want to increase humanitarian assistance. And the last thing that I want to do is say anything at this podium that's going to put that process at risk. Regardless, as we've said before, we still believe that reaching an agreement is the absolute best outcome, not only for the hostages, but for the Palestinian people. We're not going to stop working to that effort. Now, as you know, the President talked with Prime Minister Netanyahu this morning. The call lasted about 30 minutes and was constructive. The President reaffirmed his message on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. The two leaders discussed the shared commitment of Israel and the United States to remember the 6 million Jews who were systematically targeted and slaughtered in the Holocaust, one of the darkest chapters in human history, and to forcefully act against anti-Semitism and all forms of hate-fueled violence. Now, of course, the two leaders spoke about our efforts to secure the hostage deal, including through these ongoing talks today. During the call, at the President's urging, Prime Minister Netanyahu agreed to ensure that the Kerem Shalom crossing is back open for humanitarian assistance for those who need it. And I also want to take a moment to address the latest reports now out of Rafah, which was also a topic of discussion on the call. I'll reiterate again that we cannot and we will not speak for IDF operations, but we've made clear our views about operations in Rafah that could potentially put more than 1 million innocent people at greater risk. During his call with Prime Minister Netanyahu, the President again made this clear. He also made clear that we continue to believe that the hostage deal is the best way to avoid that sort of an outcome while securing the release of those hostages. And as I said, those conversations continue. Now, just one more thing. President Biden hosted His Majesty King Abdullah II of Jordan for lunch at the White House. That probably wrapped up here just recently. They discussed the strong partnership between the United States and Jordan. They also spoke about the situation in Gaza, of course, including efforts to secure the hostage deal and to get more humanitarian assistance into the civilians of Gaza. We're going to have a more detailed readout of that conversation here very, very soon. Just don't have it right now, but you'll be seeing it shortly.
As far as you can tell, which proposal did Hamas accept?
I'm not going to get into that yet, Steve.
Is the issue over how long the ceasefire will last?
Again, you're asking me for the parameters around the response and the deal itself, and I'm just not going to do that.
Lastly, Israel has called on people in Rafah to evacuate. Does that presage a full-scale assault? What do we see?
As I said in my opening statement, I'm not going to speak for IDF operations or their military intentions and plans. They should be the ones to answer those kinds of questions. What I can only reiterate is that we've been consistent, and the President was consistent again this morning, that we don't support ground operations in Rafah that would put the majority or even any of the civilians there at any greater risk. We want to see their safety and security allowed for and factored in.
Noting your caveats at the top, are you able to say whether Hamas was agreeing to something that had been discussed over the last several days?
Again, without getting into the details of it, and Director Burns is still talking to partners about this. There have been ongoing negotiations and talks here for weeks, and the director traveled recently to see if we can't bring this thing home. And again, without speaking about the details of the response by Hamas, I think it's safe to conclude that that response came as a result or at the end of these continued discussions that Director Burns was part of.
And when you feel have a better sense of what is happening, when will you get a readout from Director Burns later today or tomorrow?
I don't know. The President has been briefed on the response. He's aware of where the situation, where the process is. What you're asking me is like, when are we going to get like a final,
What is the answer?
final table slap here? There's a process that has been worked in the past and will be worked this time. You get a response by Hamas. We're going to have to evaluate that. We're going to see what's in it. Certainly, the Israelis must have a chance to look at this and to evaluate it. and Director Burns, as we speak, literally as you and I are talking, are having these conversations with partners in the region. It would be great. I'm sure we'd all like to have an answer as soon as possible, but I just don't want to get ahead of that process.
And to follow up on the readout, when do you expect the differential crossing to reopen, or is it already?
It should be open very, very soon. Prime Minister Netanyahu committed to opening it on the call this morning, so at 2:30 is it open? I don't know, but he assured the president that it would be reopened. It has been closed for several days.
And one more, City Community Executive Director Joel Program said over the weekend that Northern Gaza is in a full-fledged famine. Is that the assessment of the U.S. government?
The UN has not declared a famine in Gaza writ large, but I don't want to understate the degree of need here and the dire situation that so many people in Gaza are in, particularly with respect to food and water. So it is not a great situation, clearly, and that's why, again, we're working so hard to get this deal in place so we can keep that humanitarian assistance up at a higher level.
I understand you want to get into the specifics here, but is it your understanding that this is Hamas's final offer? I mean, is there still room to negotiate here?
I think it's going to depend on our evaluation and the Israelis' evaluation of the response and where we go from there.
And as Steve mentioned, the Israelis are already warning people to evacuate Gaza. If they do go through with this operation, is the U.S. willing to consider putting limits or conditions on aid?
I won't get ahead of where we are right now, Mary, in the process here. And I'm certainly not going to speak to hypothetical operations that haven't happened yet. I think we just have to see what transpires. The president was very direct and consistently so this morning that we don't want to see major ground operations in Rafah that put these people at greater risk.
But a month ago, the administration did make clear that the U.S. would change its approach, right, if Israel didn't take significant steps to address the humanitarian crisis.
That's right.
Does that still hold? Is it possible that the U.S. could change course if the humanitarian process isn't improved?
Of course.
And
We always have the right to adjust our policies as appropriate, and that has not changed. No.
And presumably an operation in Rafah would jeopardize steps to address the humanitarian.
All I can say is we've been very direct and very consistent in our views of concerns about operations in Rafah.
Does the U.S. currently have any sense of whether Israel is inclined or not inclined to accept this deal?
I won't speak for the Israelis.
What the President and the Prime Minister spoke earlier today, was this specific framework discussed, and did the President encourage or pressure on the Prime Minister to accept this framework?
You're talking about what Hamas says they responded to. So just so you have the tick-tock here, but when they were talking this morning, we did not have news that Hamas had responded. So that news broke after the call. That said, as I mentioned in my opening statement, of course they talked about the hostage deal and the importance of getting it secure.
So you're saying when the two leaders spoke, Hamas had not yet.
It would be
accepted
wrong
this
for-
framework,
yeah.
so the President would not have specifically asked the Prime Minister to.
Correct.
potentially
It would be
accept
wrong
this
for you to conclude that the call this morning was about having the Israelis accept the Hamas response. The Hamas response hadn't happened yet.
Did he broadly encourage the Prime Minister to get yes to some sort of deal?
He, as he has consistently with Prime Minister Netanyahu, urged that we get this deal secure. But it wasn't a pressure call. It wasn't about twisting his arm towards a certain set of parameters. Director Burns is in the region having these conversations with the Israelis, the Qataris, the Egyptians, as we speak, and that's the forum for working out the parameters of it. But the president clearly talked to the Prime Minister about the importance of getting a deal done. Yeah.
And John, what is the President's position on a limited operation in Rafah?
I don't think I can answer it any differently than I did with Mary. We've been very clear that we don't support a major ground operation in Rafah. Operations in general that put at greater risk the more than 1 million people that are sheltering there. And the question right now is a hypothetical. I mean, we're aware they've dropped leaflets. We're aware that they're warning people to evacuate. I let them speak to their operations and to their intentions. Nothing's changed about where we are with respect to operations in Rafah that could put those people at greater risk.
Right, but you know that they are asking people in the area to evacuate, and the possibility of a limited Rafah operation is on the table. So I'm asking, does the President believe that Israel can execute a limited operation in Rafah while adequately protecting the lives of civilians there?
The President doesn't want to see operations in Rafah that put at greater risk the more than 1 million people that are seeking refuge.
you wouldn't support a limited operation in Rafah.
I think I've answered the question.
To the back.
Francesca, picking up on the timeline, so prior to Hamas saying that they accepted this proposal, what, as you understood them to be, were the sticking points for either Hamas or the Israelis in the deal that had been on the table?
I'm not gonna get into that.
Okay, did it involve Rafah in any way?
I'm not gonna talk about the parameters of the proposal that was worked for this Hamas response, and I'm certainly not gonna talk about the response right now. I mean, I do understand the curiosity, and you guys are all asking exactly the right questions, all very fair. But I really do hope you understand that the last thing I would ever wanna do from this podium is say something that could put this very sensitive process at greater risk. We are at a critical stage right now. We got a response from Hamas. Now, Director Burns is working through that, trying to assess it, working with the Israelis. I mean, my goodness, folks, I don't know that it gets any more sensitive than right now. And the worst thing that we can do is start speculating about what's in it.
And one more thing on Rafah, what was your understanding why the Israelis were only evacuating part of Rafah at this time?
You'd have to talk to the Israelis.
Thanks, Green. Thanks, Admiral. You previously said several times that the ball is in court of Hamas, previous stages of negotiations. Would it be fair to say now that the ball is in Israel's court?
It's going to depend on what the response actually says and the conversations that we have with the Israelis about where we go from here.
And just one other thing, if I can ask, do you have any sense that Israel is currently using this threat or the start of an operation in Rafah as a means of putting pressure on Hamas at the stage of the
Again,
negotiations?
you'd have to talk to the Israelis about it.
You said that you did not know the news during the call, but were you surprised by, was the White House surprised by Hamas saying that they reached a deal or agreeing to the agreement?
It wasn't like we had a heads up about it. We knew that, as I said publicly, they had a proposal in front of them. And as I was just reminded of the fact that I said many times, it was, ball was in Hamas's court. So we certainly knew that they had it before them and we were waiting on word. We had hoped that there would be word very, very soon. We certainly had hoped that there would be word today, but did we know the exact moment that Al Jazeera was able to break the news that Hamas had a response? No, we didn't predict that particular moment.
Are you
Speaking of
encouraged that you are at this sensitive point? You've been talking about it's a very sensitive point, it's important.
We'll be encouraged when we get a deal in place and we can start seeing hostages get back with their families. That'll be encouraging.
And if I can, what role, if any, do you feel like the leaflets and the pressure of evacuation or the announcement of evacuating, do you think that had any role in triggering Hamas?
I don't think we know that.
John, can you talk a little bit about the timeline as the administration understands it of those evacuations? How much time do people have to leave? Did you guys put any demands on the Israelis in terms of how those evacuations are to take place under the parameters that you guys have talked about?
We're asking questions of the Israelis about what their intentions are here and what the larger purpose of this evacuation is and sort of where they're wanting to go. I think to answer your question though, you really have to go to the Israelis and to speak to their military operations and plans. I'm not going to get ahead of that. But are we curious about the timing and the intent and where they're going? Yes, absolutely. And the president expressed our curiosity about that on the call today.
But more than curiosity, are you expressing what you want to see happen in terms of those evacuations, how they take place, whether Israel is prepared for people moving around?
I would just say, again, without, I don't want to get ahead of operations that haven't happened. I don't want to speak for the Israeli military. I can just say that we don't want to see operations in and around Rafah that make it harder for the people that are seeking refuge there and shelter to be safe and secure. And we have made that case privately to the Israelis. The president did it again today with the prime minister directly. We certainly made it publicly. We've been very, very consistent about that.
To the back.
John, noting everything you've said about the concerns expressed by the U.S. about the risk to Palestinians in Gaza or the full-scale operation, is the U.S. still aligned with Israel in its intention to eliminate the terrorist threat posed by Hamas?
Of course.
And is there any feeling that Hamas may be trying to trick in some way. We heard Israeli officials, commenting on this latest proposal as a trick, and there's been a lot of pressure to.
Yeah, no, go ahead, sorry, I'm listening.
Well, there's been, pressure, on the administration to make sure that the needs of Palestinians are being, served, and that the US support for Israel isn't, overhanded. And you had the report come out earlier today, or maybe yesterday, that the US was potentially weighing, withholding an arms shipment to Israel. Is there any concern that Hamas was trying to capitalize on that public pressure and, play a trick as Israeli officials put it?
I mean, I don't think there's any possible way I can answer that question unless I got between the ears of Mr. Sinwar, and that's a place I really don't want to be. I think that is a great question for him. It's interesting. I stand up here and answer questions. Kareem does. Matt Miller at the State Department, Pentagon colleagues, the President does. Prime Minister Netanyahu does, and the IDF military spokesman does. You know who hasn't answered a single question about his intentions and what games he might be playing or where he intends to take this? Mr. Sinwar, the head of Hamas. And I think it's high time that he answers some of these questions and he come clean about what his intentions are. I don't know. All I know is we've got a response. Bill Burns is looking at that response. He's talking to the Israelis about it, and we'll see where this goes. Hopefully, whatever's in this thing, hopefully it can lead to those hostages getting out real soon with their families where they need to be. And as each day passes, their lives get further at risk. So time is really of the essence here.
Noting your answer, is it still a good idea to try to negotiate with terrorists then?
It's not like we sit down pie in the sky and say, hey, today's a good day, let's negotiate with terrorists. You gotta negotiate with who you gotta negotiate to get people back with their families. So frankly, if there's a better idea to get those hostages home with their families, I think we'd love to hear them. I just don't think there's another way to do it. There's no other way to do it, quite frankly. You gotta negotiate through Qatar with Hamas to get those folks back with their families. And that's the hard work of diplomacy. Sometimes it means you gotta sit across the table from some really bad folks that you'd rather not have to talk to. But they got those hostages and we want them back.
The U.S. backs Israel's intention to eliminate Hamas.
We, of course, back their right responsibility to go after the Hamas threat, to eliminate that threat. Now look, Jackie, I've said many times here, you're not going to eliminate an ideology through military operations. But does Israel have a right and a responsibility to eliminate the threat that they suffered on the 7th of October? 100%, absolutely they do. And we've been nothing but very steadfast on that.
Thanks for anything, John. Speaking about TikTok, what prompted this morning's call?
I think you've heard me say many times, they talk as appropriate. And given where we were in hostage deal negotiations, given where we were with humanitarian assistance and Kerem Shalom being shut down for several days, certainly given where we were with expectations in Rafah, this made all the sense in the world for today to be the day that the President and Prime Minister Netanyahu speak.
But when exactly was the call set up? Was it this morning? Was it yesterday after the rocket attack that killed 3 Israelis? Or what?
I would tell you the initial planning for the call took place late in the weekend. That's when I'd say.
And one more on a different topic, why did the U.S. halt ammunition shipment?
Yeah, look, I've seen the press reporting on this. All I can tell you is that, to Jackie's question, our support for Israel's security remains ironclad, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of one shipment over another.
Our embassies reporting that it included 2,000-pound bombs that may have been used in Rafah. Did concerns over Rafah and what the Israelis could use this ammunition for, did that play a role in halting that shipment?
Don't have a better answer for you, other than the one I just gave you.
I just want to go with that question one more time. Did the United States pause on the shipment to Israel? Is that reporting correct?
I'm not going to confirm that for you.
Okay. Just another topic. Well, same topic. Different question. Over the weekend, the Queen of Jordan said in an interview that the United States is giving the world mixed messages, offering both expressions of concern and support for Gaza, in addition to providing arms to Israel. Can you comment at all on this, on criticism on the critique of the United States position?
I'm not gonna, I don't think it'd be appropriate to get into a back and forth here from the podium on this. We have said that two things can be true at once, and they are. Israel has a right and a responsibility to defend itself, and we're gonna continue to provide for their security and help them with that. And at the same time, they have a right and an obligation to be careful about civilian casualties and getting more humanitarian assistance in. And that's why we're working so hard on this hostage deal. And that's why the President and the United States continue to lead the world in terms of actually making a difference in that outcome, making life better for the Palestinian people. No other country is doing more than the United States to try to increase that assistance and get the ceasefire in place.
And just really quickly, the Israelis stopped broadcast of Al Jazeera. Can you comment on whether that's an appropriate action or if the United States ally?
We don't support that action. As we said very clearly on World Press Freedom Day on Friday, I know Kareem talked about this, the work of independent journalism around the world is absolutely vital. It's important to an informed citizenry and public, but it's also important to help inform the policy-making process. So we don't support that at all.
And did the president bring it up at all in his call?
The focus of the call was on hostage deal and on Rafah. But you saw my, sorry, you saw, I think I put a statement out this morning on that, so we have officially reacted.
Thank you so much, Karine. Thank you, John. Is the administration planning on discussing the banning of Al Jazeera in Israel with the Israeli government? We just celebrated the freedom of press here in the United States and across the globe, and then this decision came, and it was really a big
As I
shock.
just
Will
said,
the
we don't-
administration raise this issue with the government of Israel?
We have raised this issue, and I've made a public statement about it.
And on Rafah, has Israel presented or provided the administration with a comprehensive plan for Rafah until now?
No.
I want to take you back to this report on whether shipments were lost.
Okay.
Are the reports wrong?
I'm not going to confirm the press reporting yet. What I've said is our security commitments to Israel are ironclad. The president pushed very hard to get that supplemental funding so that we can continue to help Israel with its security needs.
You can appreciate the ambiguity makes it sound like it was true.
I can't speak for what you appreciate in my answer. All I can do is tell you that my answer is not going to change.
What is the definition of a assault or attack on Rafah in the view of the White House?
There hasn't been an assault or an attack in terms of a ground operation at this time, so let's not get ahead of where we are. President did express, again, our concerns about operations in Rafah that would put at risk these people trying to find shelter there. I think it would be a futile exercise for me to get up here and give you a laundry list of what would or would not compose some kind of a ground operation in Rafah. We have to, well, let me put it another way. The IDF has to speak to what their intentions there.
But it's still ground operation versus missiles landing over Rafah.
Well, it doesn't matter whether it's missiles or rockets, things that kill innocent people, that's not okay. And again, the president made it clear that we don't want to see operations in Rafah that put at risk. There's 1.5 million people out there.
How does the president assess Bill Burns' ongoing attempts to make sure it's still happening?
It's a nice side way of getting at sort of talking to the parameters of the deal. I appreciate that. He's very grateful for.
Well, I was more genuinely interested when he thinks the
really?
CIA director.
Oh. Excellent. I'm sorry, I impugned your question. Look, I think he's very grateful for the work that Director Burns and the whole team has been doing to try to get us to this point. But it only really matters if we can get the deal in place, and I'm sure Director Burns would agree with me on that. And those hostages can get home. But he's done terrific work thus far, and I know that he wants to see that get this across the finish line just as much as we do.
Thank you, Kareem. Admiral, on a different topic, reports breaking news last few minutes that a U.S. soldier has been detained in Russia. This apparently happened in the last few days. The reporting is he had been stationed in Korea, traveled to Russia on his own. He's been accused of some sort of theft. Is the administration aware of this report?
Yes.
What can you tell us about what happened?
I can't really say much about it right now, Jonathan. I hope you can understand that. And certainly it's a better question put to our DoD colleagues, but we are aware of this case.
And another matter just related to Russia, there's been threats from Moscow in the last couple of days about striking British military facilities because of and also simulating nuclear drills as it sharply rises tensions because of weapons manufactured in the UK being used in the conflict. This says it could potentially apply to other allied countries as well. The United States, your response to that?
Well, what I'd say, number one, is it's just reckless and irresponsible for the leader of a major nuclear armed power to be saber rattling the way that he is with respect to potential use for nuclear weapons. Obviously we monitor this and have continued to monitor this very closely. I can tell you we've seen nothing, even despite the reckless rhetoric, that would cause us to change our strategic deterrent posture. And look, lastly, if Mr. Putin and Russian officials are worried about their troops in Ukraine getting hit with weapons from other countries, then the easiest thing to do is just take your troops and leave.
There are reports of AFP right now that Israel is committing airstrikes on Rafah, defense airstrikes on Rafah. What would that timing mean to the relationship between President and Prime Minister?
Well, sir, you know something I don't know. I haven't seen those reports. I can't confirm it. I'll just go back to what I've said. I don't know, half a dozen, if not more times today. We don't support operations in Rafah that put people at great risk.
Thank you, Colleen, and thank you, John. I just wanted to make it clear that regarding the limit on the refined petroleum provided by Russia to North Korea, do any refined petroleum limit under UN sanctions against North Korea is 500,000 barrels. But last week you said that the limit was exceeded at 165,000 barrels in March alone. So how many barrels were supplied in January and February?
I will have to take that question and get back to you. I didn't bring the barrel data with me today.
And one more question again. Yes, State Department spokesperson Miller said that sanctions against this will be imposed this month. And North Korea oil tanker sanctioned by the UN is currently staying in Chinese waters. So is China including sanctions this time, or sanctions against Russia and sanctions against China?
I will admit that I will owe you now yet another answer. I'll get back to you with something more detailed. I will only just say, to exit myself from this question gracefully, that we want everybody to enforce the sanctions that are against North Korea appropriately and consistently. And not everybody does. And North Korea has benefited from sanctions evasions by countries in the region and beyond the region. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, John. I have a question on Russia and growing ties between China and Russia. Putin is reportedly visiting China this month, and right before this visit, just last week, we learned that Russian police raided the homes of Falun Gong practitioners in Russia. This is a group persecuted in China, and detained several of them. Does the White House have any reaction to this? And I have a follow-up.
I haven't seen the reports about the detention of these individuals. If they're true, certainly that would be concerning to us. But I'd probably refer you to the State Department to speak a little bit more about that than I can. Just again, writ large, we have seen China and Russia try to grow closer together. We believe a big reason for that is, frankly, the United States and putting themselves in positions to either oppose our foreign policy objectives or to try to be an obstacle to them in many, many different ways. So it's concerning to us. most specific concern that we have right now is the fact that some Chinese companies are providing microelectronics and components so that Mr. Putin can continue his defense industrial base improvements and developments and put weapons in the field that just kill innocent Ukrainians. And again, we've been we've made those concerns clear directly to our Chinese counterparts in Ukraine.
Yeah, the last question.
Yeah, I did want to ask, just a clarification first on the team visit. Meeting with another senior administrative defense department, anybody?
Not that I'm aware of.
So this wasn't like a broader bilateral kind of?
No, the president hosted me for lunch. They've done this before.
And secondly, can you give us
I can't, but look, I can't speak to his whole schedule. He's in town, so I'm not aware of any other meetings, but that doesn't mean.
But it wasn't like a broader bilateral here at the White House?
No.
And on the pier, the temporary pier, if you could give us an update on that and whether or not like a ceasefire would need to be in place for that to be fully implemented in operation?
A ceasefire doesn't have to be in place for the pier to operate. Now, obviously, something like this is a whole heck of a lot easier. There's no fighting going on, but it doesn't have to be. In fact, one of the big issues that we are still working out is what the force protection laydown would look like and how not just the people operating the pier, but the material itself can be safe from any attack. As far as I know, and again, you should go to the Pentagon for more detail, essentially the pier itself has been constructed. It is not in place because last week they had some weather issues in the Eastern Med, so they weren't able to put it in place. You should go to the Pentagon for like where it is right now. As I understand it, it's still not being put into place. Then you gotta anchor it, and you've gotta make sure you build a causeway so you can get to and from it. And so there's still a lot of work that has to be done to get it operational, and that would include the force protection laydown. But no, the short answer to your question is you don't have to have a ceasefire in place to use the template.
Thank you, Admiral.
Thank you, Crane. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Joe. All right, I do have a